Well, hello, everybody. Dan Turbyville here, and welcome to the Powerhouse Fence Show. Today is a great day. Ilaria's back.
Hi.
Hello. And so, what did you go to Italy for? Let's just clear this up.
Christmas and wedding planning.
It was something to do with your wedding.
Yes.
All right. So I wasn't just completely wrong. I was just 90% wrong.
It's okay. At least I got you straight.
She did. She did. All right. Well, thanks for being here. This is season 3, episode 1. That's crazy. Season 3. Yay. So happy to be here. Thanks everybody for listening. It's been really fun so far. Our show is presented by Memphis Fence Company, MFC Manufacturing, Simpalo, and the Thornton Fence Consulting Group. The title of this episode is Efficiency. If you want some help increasing your efficiency, you should call the Thornton Fence Consulting Group. I think that's one of their biggest things that they try to do is help you increase efficiency and profitability. So check it out. We are live. There is a phone number on the bottom of the screen again. So if you do want to call in, you can. Again, thanks everybody for being here. Thanks for listening. If you want to hear anything specific, if you want to request any guests, if you want to do any of that stuff, feel free to reach out to us and we will try our best to accommodate that. So I'd like to know, this episode 2 will basically have some history in it, just like the last one a couple weeks ago. And I'd be curious to know if anyone has any feedback on this kind of format or anything. I enjoy it, so I guess I'm just doing what I like.
As you should.
Yeah, hopefully people enjoy it as well. So we will be attending Fence Tech 2025. We started off strong talking about planning, thinking about planning, and we haven't done anything since. So it will be just like everything else, it seems, and we're going to wait till the last minute, and then we're going to go, oh, crap. Fence Tech is almost here, and we haven't done anything to get ready. So we're not going to let that happen, though, are we, Ilaria?
Absolutely not.
We're about to get right on it, and we're about to get everything planned and everything in order. So it's going to be nice and stress-free.
Hopefully.
If you're local to our area, the Memphis Tri-State Fence Association, our local AFA chapter, their Christmas-ish dinner is coming up January 18th at the Butcher Shop in Memphis. It would be cool to see some people there. So if you're around, maybe come by and check that out. So now, the Italian word of the week.
We're starting off strong.
We are.
Okay.
And I'm about to nail this.
Okay.
The Italian word is efficient.
Efficiente.
I told you, I already said it first. Do it again.
Efficiente.
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 Efficient.
You said you were going to nail it. Is that what we're starting 2025?
Yeah, I guess. Sorry. I tried my best. I gave it a solid effort.
That's okay. That's all that matters. It's still a C+.
That's not bad. I passed. Okay, so now into the topic of the show. I want to kind of go back a couple of weeks ago. We talked a lot about change and technology, things that are coming up, things that have already happened. Technology doesn't only mean computers. There's been technological advancements since humanity existed, and they were not all computers. It could be tools, equipment, vehicles, anything like that. Has anyone out there implemented any new technology here in the past few weeks? Maybe you spent some money at the end of the year and had to and got some new technology going. Let us know. So efficiency. What is efficiency? What do you think, Ilaria?
Planning. So you
Planning?
get stuff done in a timely manner.
Okay. All right. Well, before I start reading this stuff, I just want to apologize for what I'm going to do to some of these words.
Okay.
Some of the names and words, I know I'm going to mess them up. So just bear with me. All right. So I looked up the definition of efficiency, and it was very amazing. The definition is the quality or degree of being efficient. Blew my mind. So then I looked up efficient, and it's capable of producing desired results with little or no waste as of time or materials, right? So you're not wasting any time or wasting material getting something done. And then there's also a definition for efficient operation, which is effective operation is measured by comparison of production with cost. And those costs could be energy, time, money, or the ratio of useful energy delivered by a dynamic system to the energy supplied to it. So, kind of in my simple mind, I thought basically a comparison of what goes in versus what comes out. So, if somebody puts in 8 hours of work, what'd you get? How much time were they producing something? How much product was a result of those 8 hours? How much time did they waste? And same thing with the machine. You know, if you're going to run a machine, then what do you get out of it in that time that you run it? How efficient is that machine? So I always like to start. Well, I always. This is the second time that I've done something like this, and both times I started with the definition. So we can't really talk about efficiency in manufacturing or machinery or anything else without talking about Toyota and their manufacturing. If you have not read the book Toyota Way, then it really, I think the audiobook is, I don't know, it's like 18 hours or something. It's crazy. But they get really deep off into how Toyota came up with their manufacturing process or production system. So I looked at an article, and it was on the Toyota UK magazine. And so I kind of pulled the definition of a few words here. Excuse me, sorry. Out of that article. First word is muda. So in English, that word would mean waste. Um, so that is, it says it refers to a wide range of non value adding activities. Eliminating waste is one of the main principles of the just in time system, and that's a main pillar of Toyota production. Uh, so anything unnecessary, right? Unnecessary financial cost, unnecessary storage cost, worthless stock of old items. A lot of times for us here, we talked about we started using this term muda a little bit, and it was a lot of delivering more than the customer expected, right? So if you delivered more than what was not even really what the customer expected, but what was even necessary to make it a positive experience for the customer. Um, and like delivering things that they wouldn't even know, right? They don't care about. It doesn't improve the longevity of the product. It doesn't improve the usability of the product. None of that stuff. It's just something that we wanted to put in there because we were fence people, and ultimately it made us feel good about the product we were making. And so we had some conversations about that. Is that where were we were we putting too much in there, and was that waste? Hopefully that makes sense. I felt like I kind of fumbled through that a little bit, uh, but yeah. So we started kind of looking at that, and we said, man, are we doing more than what we need to do? And could we deliver a product that worked just as well, looked just as nice, and save some money, right? And ultimately, that cost savings would be for us and passed along to the customer. Uh, so the next word that they had on the Toyota UK magazine was Muri, Muri. So in English, that would be overburden. And so one of the things Toyota tries to do is eliminate overburden of equipment and people. That's also one of the main principles of the just-in-time system. And so they like to balance the manufacturing pace and allow people sufficient time to achieve a correct standard. Okay, so they're not putting too much burden on their team members and expecting them to do more than what is actually possible. Right? So they're putting a realistic burden on them. They're asking them to perform at a realistic level. I'm just going to keep saying the same thing in different ways until I feel like I've said it enough, I guess. Uh, Mura is the third, which is unevenness or irregularity. So, third thing that's kind of a main principle is eliminating unevenness or irregularities in their production process. So, a big thing that they try to do is they try to predict and prepare for times of higher demand. So, that way people don't come to work one day and say, hey, we need to make 4 cars today. And then they come to work the next day and they need to make 40. And the next they need to make 60. And then they go back to 4. Like they're trying to cut out that roller coaster, right? So they want to kind of even it all out. And they want smooth production, and they do that by trying to predict and prepare for what's coming down the road. And I think that's important. I personally haven't figured out a good way to do that, like predict what this industry is going to hold for us in Memphis, Tennessee in 2025. I'll kind of set goals, right, and set targets, but I don't really have any good method of predicting uh, times of higher or lower demand. We know typically for us, like, springtime, there's going to be a bump in spring and through summer, and then we'll kind of fall off a little bit in the fall. And then around December, there's another bump because people are trying to get stuff done before the end of the year. So, like, we kind of know those patterns, but as far as like overall how much work we're going to do or how many calls we're going to get, like that's really hard for me. So if anybody has any ideas about how to predict what the market is going to be like in any given year, then let me know. If you want to come on here and talk about it, we can do that. All right, so we kind of talked a little bit about what efficiency is. So now let's take a look and say, why do we care about efficiency? Right? What does it matter? Well, obviously, if it could improve the bottom line, right? Improve your profits or your net income. It could increase your value, the value of your product that you're delivering to the customer. So you could give them the same product for less money, or for the same money, a better product, something like that. You can increase the value that you're delivering. And then what's really interesting to me is being able to outperform your competition. So ultimately, how are we selling a job, right? So it's like a job is just our cost of goods sold plus a margin. Okay, so cost of goods sold, labor, material, any direct expenses to a job, and then you add a margin on top of it. There's your price. I would say if you're doing like, labor, I mean, not labor. If you're doing like material times 2 or material times 3, 2025 is probably a good year for you to change the way you're bidding jobs. So an increase in efficiency is going to allow you to lower your cost of goods sold. We're all buying material. I would suspect we're all paying relatively the same. It's going to fluctuate some depending on how much money people spend with certain vendors, or how much money you spend overall. That's going to fluctuate the price you pay of material some, but I really don't think it's that much. Somebody might save 5% over someone else, or something along those lines. I don't think you're making any real 30, 40, 50% savings by, if you looked at one company or the next. So then you have your labor cost, right? The other big piece of your cost of goods sold is your labor cost. So if you can increase efficiency on your installations, it's going to lower your cost of goods sold, right? So if you can increase your efficiencies that are happening within your sales and management team, then that's going to lower your overhead, right? So now you can have a lower cost of goods sold. You can have a lower overhead, which means in theory you could have a lower margin and still make the money that you want to make. And all of that should translate into more sales. So, like I said, the whole outperforming your competition is not like I you hear people say this phrase like, racing to the bottom or something like that. I'm not trying to do that. But if I can figure out ways to do the job properly and deliver a product that I'm pleased with and do it in a more efficient way, I'm all about that. So where does this whole notion of efficiency, right? So let's go back through history a little bit and let's look at some examples. And hopefully I can do this in an efficient manner and not waste a bunch of time going things like that. So first of all, there was Frank and Lillian Gilbreth. All right, so they went in factories and they studied the walking paths. I believe the guy, I can't remember his name, but the founder of Rolex, I believe did the same thing. And I could be getting that mixed up with somebody else, but I believe he did the same thing. And I mean, they sat there and they watched how people walked and mapped it out. Right. And so they called these motion studies, and they drew maps of the floor. They tracked everybody's walking path as they went through the factory floors and things like that. And they figured out how they could eliminate unnecessary steps. They it says they had a method called Thurblings, which is one of those words I'm probably saying wrong. And they broke down tasks into fundamental motions and identified inefficiencies. All right. So that all of that is really crazy to me, that somebody would spend the time and sit there and watch people walk around the floor and map out the path that they're taking and then change the layout or change the paths. And I mean, I guess if somebody walks the same path 100 times a day and you save them 10 steps every time, you do that over the course of a year, and how much you're paying that person, like, you potentially could make a decent change in your labor cost. So they, again, optimized the path that the workers were taking. And it says they dramatically improved efficiencies in various industries, including manufacturing. I think about when I was a young feller, and I would come up here in the summers and sometimes on the weekends and stuff like that while I was still in school. And I remember one of the foremen or crew leaders at the time, he told me, he said, if you walk back to that truck to get something, you carry something with you. Right. So if you're going back to get another stack of boards off the truck and bring it to the fence line, well, pick up a piece of trash or a handful of trash and you carry it back to the truck with you. So that way, when it's time for us to pack up, there's less trips required. You're walking back to the truck anyway, carry something with you. And so that was kind of his own way of making the paths that we were walking a little bit more efficient. Something that always stuck with me. Anytime I went and did an install myself, that's what I would tell people as well. Hey, you're going back to the truck, carry some crap with you. Don't walk back to the truck empty handed. I think maybe that was the way he phrased it, is never walk back to the truck with your hands empty. So again, it always stuck with me. And it's just those little things. I mean, it saved us probably 10 minutes a day. And I mean, you have a crew of 3 people and you got 2, 3, 10 crews, whatever. I mean, that's a pretty decent chunk of time right there. We talked about Henry Ford last time. And I know I already confessed that I was a fan of Ford and Henry Ford and all of the things that they've done. So I'm not gonna talk about them every time, but I will this time. So if you listened a couple weeks ago, you'll know that Ford worked at Edison Illuminating Company, and that's when he was there or directly after he left there, I'm not sure, he built a quadricycle, his first car, and that was in 1896. And then he went on and he changed manufacturing as we know it. So back then, cars were like expensive luxury items. They were not something that everybody could afford. They were average Americans could not afford to buy a car. And it was because they were produced very slowly and it was very costly to produce them. And so in 1913, Ford developed a moving assembly line. This moving assembly line, it it drastically reduced the time that it took for them to produce a Model T, or it says affordable cars such as Model Ts, but it took the production time of a Model T from 12 hours and it reduced it all the way down to 90 minutes, which is crazy. I mean, that's a massive reduction. Now, I mean, that is a whole assembly line, right? So going back to the whole carry something back to the truck, like those are little things. The assembly line, granted, it's a big thing. They also standardize stuff, and you've probably heard, you can have any colors you want, any, bleh. You can have any color you want so long as it's black, right? That kind of stuff. So I think they had a lot of standardizations. They didn't offer all the options and everything like they have today. We talked about last time how we did the $5 work day, which basically doubled the pay of everybody in that industry, or people locally in the auto manufacturing industry at least. And so doing that reduced turnover, increased productivity. He was getting a higher quality of worker on the factory floor, and that higher quality of worker allowed them to become more efficient. And then he also cut his training costs because most of those people had already done the job before or something similar. And so when he cut his training costs, he's reducing overhead, right? So efficiency is not always about machines. Like it can be just about optimizing the process and then, motivating people, taking care of people, um, culture. So it doesn't always have to be about, putting in new machines and investing in new technologies and things like that. It can just be changing the way that you're doing stuff now. So they were able to reduce the cost of the Model T from $850 down all the way to 260 by over the course of several years by increasing efficiencies and making standardizations and all of those things. So that's pretty impressive to me. So this is a lot of process innovation and empowering people to improve their own productivity and reduce cost. So processes, standards, all of those things, like you'll see, there's multiple stories here, and that's a recurring theme that happens in a lot of these stories. So this next person, I've never heard of them before, but I'm kind of interested in them. This is Frederick Winslow Taylor. He was born in 1856 and died in 1915. American mechanical engineer. He was born into a wealthy family, and he became a chief engineer at Midvale Steel. He did a lot of time and motion studies, right? So kind of similar to the people that we talked about before. And so back then, factories lacked standardization. Production varied greatly due to inefficient workflows and unmotivated workers. Right. So again, here we are with standards, workflows, processes, all of those things. So Taylor applied some sort of scientific principles, and I don't know what they are, but I kind of like to nerd out on data and numbers and things along those lines. And so I'd be really curious to know what these scientific principles are. But he was able to analyze and optimize workflow. And that's when it says that he introduced standardization and best practices. I don't know. There's not really any specific examples that I found. I haven't done a lot of research, though. Like I said, this is a person I'm interested in, and I'd like to see if I can find out more about him. But I don't know any best practices and standardizations yet that he introduced, right? I know he did the time and motion studies, broke tasks down into smaller steps and timed them to identify inefficiencies. So I've done that myself. I've spent some time doing that. I took a whiteboard and I wrote out every step that a job goes through within our office, all the way from the time the job's a new lead through the sales process, the customer sign, follow ups, then they sign the contract, then we have to get material, da 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 da. If you're listening to this, you probably know that process, so I guess I can stop. But I broke all of that down, and then I identified who does those steps, right? So if it's a type A job or a type B job or a type C job, and that's just different types of fence or different departments, then who is responsible for those steps and how many different hands does that same job pass through, so to speak? And it was pretty crazy for me to see how many different steps, how many times that stuff got passed back and forth between people. And I mean, just where the job went, right? Just kind of the life of a job and the path of it. It's pretty wild. I would encourage you to do it. I don't it didn't really change anything for me, to be honest. It maybe should have, probably should have, but I didn't really change anything as a result of it. It just kind of opened my eyes. And I think, that I heard somebody talking the other day. It was actually, I think it was in the book called Good to Great. And they said that they were talking about like pivotal moments, right? And they said there's not really like a single day, hour, minute that they could find in a pivotal that was a pivotal moment for these companies when they turned from good to great. They said it's kind of like you get the right team in place and then they start spinning a giant flywheel. And so that first rotation is really, really slow, right? It's a long, slow process. And then the second one's a little bit faster, and the third one's a little bit faster. And then next thing you know, the flywheel is just spinning. But it takes time to get it started and to get it going. And so I look at a lot of these things kind of like that, right? So when I broke down all of the steps that are involved in a process or in a job, I look at that as kind of just like a little bit of me spinning the flywheel, right? It wasn't anything super pivotal. It wasn't like I changed the entire process of our organization or anything of our company, but it was just interesting to see it and to understand it and to know. So, like I said, I would encourage people to do that. If you've never read or listened to the book Good to Great, it's interesting. Excuse me. I would encourage that for everyone. So one of the things that Frederick Winslow Taylor did was he designed specialized shovels for Bethlehem Steel. So he figured out that these shovels that they were using were digging through some material faster than they were digging through other material. And so then they started digging in. No, sorry. They started getting deeper into that, I guess. I don't know. And they kind of figured out, like, wait a minute, we can make specialized shovels that are built specifically for these different types of material. And when they did that, get this, get this. So the workers at Bethlehem Steel increased their daily output from 12.5 tons to 47 tons using optimized tools and methods. And I don't know if this is a shovel by hand. I assume it was some sort of machinery, but I mean, if a guy can shovel or a lady can shovel 47 tons by hand, that's crazy. But anyways, somehow that's a massive increase is all I know. I don't know the specifics or the details, but I know that's a giant increase. And all they did was they broke it all down and they started analyzing the data that was there. And then once he figured out the data, he saw room for improvement and he saw errors, right? Or problems. So pretty crazy stuff. So he used data and analytics to identify inefficiencies and train employees in optimized workflows. So I think knowing your numbers, right? So we talk about that a lot financially, right? Know your numbers, know your overhead, know your margins, know all these things. And I 100% believe that everyone should know that. But at the same time, maybe we should know some production numbers, right? I haven't heard anybody talk too much about that in this whole know your numbers type thing, but maybe we should look at some production numbers and see what are we doing good and what are we not doing so great. So this guy, Frederick Winslow Taylor, it said he initially wanted to be a lawyer, but he had to abandon the idea because of poor eyesight. So that's pretty interesting. I guess he couldn't get glasses or there were not glasses. Ilaria, when were glasses invented?
Sorry, I have to turn off my microphone because I keep sneezing.
Uh,
A long time ago.
okay. There's
we're all blind.
So maybe he didn't have glasses and he couldn't read the law books or something.
Maybe.
That's pretty crazy. So yeah, there you go. So use data in analytics. Okay. So that's the key takeaway to me from him is data and analytics. In fact, that's the key takeaway for a few people so far. So Ray Kroc, probably know who he is. So he's the one who, transformed McDonald's. Alyssa always gets mad at me because I call it McDonald's. And I almost did it on here, but then I thought people might make fun of me or something. So he transformed it into a global fast food empire. If you've seen the movie, The Founder, I think is the name of that movie. But he went around selling milkshakes, right? And then he went to all these different fast food places, finally went to McDonald's, saw it was completely different than the others and was like, wait a minute, what do you have going on here? And then convinced them to franchise. So their system was extremely efficient at one location. Okay. How do you take that extremely efficient one location and make it into extremely efficient, I don't know, 20,000 locations or 100,000 locations or whatever? Well, I'm going to say that you probably need some good processes and good standards and all of these documented operations manuals and everything else, right? So, because you can't have, I mean, it's not like one person can go to all the different places and train everyone, right? The stores, I mean, over the course of history, opened too fast for that to even be possible. So, somehow, by way of creating some sort of procedures manuals, standards, whatever it is, they were able to pass information from one store to the next and get them up and running. And they were also able to run in that efficient manner. So, um, yeah, operations manuals. Um, I think that this maybe, I guess this was probably in like the early days of franchising. I don't think it was the first, but maybe it was in the early days of franchising. So, consistency and scalability. A lot of times, what I do is I look at processes and systems and things like that we're doing. And I say, hey, I think we could change this step of our process. And I think we could make it a little bit, hopefully, better. And one of the things that I always try to think about as I go through that is scalability. Okay. So if our company quadruples in size, can we use that same process still? If there's 4 times as many people doing this task, right? Or 10 times as many people, or whatever that is. So I always try to think, yeah, we could do it this way. And like, I could tell Ilaria, hey, I want you to do it this way. And yeah, it doesn't work great, but like, Ilaria, you have to, do these little nuances or do these weird little caveats or whatever to make this system work. Well, that doesn't sound very scalable, right? Because I can't just hand a process or a procedure to someone else and let them learn it unless they know those little nuances and those little weird things that have to happen. So again, I think a lot about scalability whenever I'm looking at processes and procedures and things like that. And I think that's really important. I left this fun fact on here that Ray Kroc worked as a DJ and a pianist before he was a businessman. How fun. I don't know. I may have skipped some other fun facts, but I tried to put a little bit of those in here. Yeah. So now, I don't know. Is this like a lecture? Is this just, are people falling asleep out there? What do you think?
I don't know. It's interesting. But now we're digging into it, right?
It's interesting, but not worth digging in.
No, now we're digging into like the actual topic. Tell people what they gotta do.
Oh,
What they should do. What you do that they could follow.
yeah. I don't know what to do.
Oh, okay.
All I know is there's some lessons in here. right? And so it's interesting to me. And I mean, I do put in some things about, hey, this is what I do.
Yeah, I agree.
But a lot of this stuff I don't know the answer to. I just know that if you look back through history and you see what people have done, then maybe it gives you an idea of what you could do today. What could we do in our business, our processes, our procedures to make them a little bit more efficient?
I mean, did you say history repeat itself eventually? So
Yeah, there you go. So Andrew Carnegie was alive from 1835 to 1919. He built Carnegie Steel, which was the largest steel company in the U.S. So he was born into poverty. The last guy was born to a wealthy family. This one was born into poverty, and he worked hard and he made it somewhere. And so this is going to be kind of similar to the Ray Kroc stuff, but the steel industry was really fragmented. It had inefficiencies in production, transportation, all of this stuff. So what Carnegie did was pretty interesting, and he employed vertical integration. And so he wanted to control every step of the supply chain. I believe Ford did this. I think Ford made their own like tires, and they had their own gas production facility. Like I think they made at one point every piece of the vehicle. I don't think they outsourced anything. But also Andrew Carnegie, who we're talking about. So he owned the mines that the raw material was coming out of the ground, or where it was coming out of the ground. He built a transportation network for railroads. Um, and so he owned this whole supply chain, and he was able to reduce the cost for himself and eliminate inefficiencies along the way. So, Ilaria, that has not been my experience. I thought that sounded like a great idea at one time, and I put in a powder coat system. And it was not my experience that we could control costs by having our own powder coat system. We over the course of several years, never were able to figure out how people do that. Well, obviously, we figured out how to powder coat, but we were not able to figure out how to do it efficiently. And, anyways, I kind of think the building was too small that we were trying to do it in, and we couldn't stage material and racks and all that stuff like we wanted to. But that's neither here nor there. So I did not have the same experience as Andrew Carnegie with my vertical integration. But it worked for him, and, a lot of the stuff that he did was, again, improving efficiency, right? So he invested in technology, he optimized labor, and he outpaced his competition. I think ultimately that's what I personally would like to do, right? Is I would like to outpace the competition. I'm not interested in cutting my margins, right? I don't wanna not make money doing fence. I always say I can go broke sitting at home, but if I can increase my efficiency, then I could maintain margins and lower cost, and it's a win-win. So I like that he focused a lot on supply chain management. Okay. And I think that's something important is supply chain management. And I feel like we do a decent job at that. We do wind up and have some inventory that, like, we probably have stuff that's been here since 1980. And I don't know how, and I don't know why, but I know there's people that'll come over here sometimes and they're like, "Hey, I'm repairing this super old fence. Do you have this part?" And it's like one is over in the attic covered in dust and it's still here. But yeah, like I said, sometimes we probably are a little lacking in the inventory department, but I think we do a pretty decent job at supply chain management. And, most of that is just having good relationship with the vendors and monitoring the data and analyzing the data and watching your inventory numbers and seeing, you can sit there and you can look and you say, all right, well, I don't know. I sold 1,000 feet of 6 foot 9 gauge every month for the next 6 months. How much do I need to order for this month? Well, probably should have at least 1,000 feet, right? Because that's what you've used every month. And there's a lot of softwares out there that allow you to do that. There's a lot of technology. I think I'm going to start just, no. there's a lot of softwares you can use. Also, so the fun fact about Andrew Carnegie, he funded over 2,500 public libraries around the world. Isn't that crazy? That's how you know you're a big baller. I mean, I don't even think I could buy 2,500 books. And this guy's got 2,500 whole public libraries that he paid for. That's crazy. So, man, how many of these do you want to hear about, Alari? You want to hear about all of them?
Narrow down to 2 and pick your favorite.
2 more?
Yes.
Oh, no. How am I going to just do 2 more?
Just for today.
Nah. We're getting through this. I feel
12 pages?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We're
Okay.
cruising along. We're
Okay.
doing good. So Eli Whitney. This is a pretty, I like this one. I actually looked up Eli Whitney a little bit and got a pretty fun story to go with this. So Eli Whitney lived from 1765 to 1825. He was an inventor, and he was best known for the cotton gin, which is the thing that I associated with Eli Whitney, but also interchangeable parts. So it says his innovations transformed agriculture and manufacturing. So back in some years, I don't know, somewhere between 1765 and 1825, any machine that you bought was custom made, apparently. I wasn't alive. I don't know. I'm not a historian. But from what I understand, any machine that you bought was custom made and there was not mass produced parts, right? They were not running any kind of standardized parts, or maybe they were like similar but not exactly the same. Because if you bought 2 cotton gins, then I mean they probably would function the same, but the parts were not exactly the same, and so they were not interchangeable from one machine to the next because each machine was made with that set of parts. So that's really crazy to me. That's one of those things that, like, when you think about it, it makes sense that it existed at some point, but I never would have thought of it. So this guy, Eli Whitney, so he's awarded a contract from the federal government for 10,000 muskets. Okay. And I guess he had sold them on the fact that these muskets would have interchangeable parts. He didn't invent the idea, by the way. So these, he hadn't delivered one. And so Congress calls him up and says, "Hey, I need you to come to this meeting that we're going to have, and I need you to justify the resources that we've invested on this venture. And why have we not gotten a single musket?" So Eli Whitney shows up and he brings 10 muskets with him. Okay, 10 of these muskets he's supposed to be building. And he lays them all on the table. He takes them all apart, mixes up all the parts, and then he puts them back together. Right? So it appears as though he assembled one musket from random parts and proving the idea that he could build these with interchangeable parts. And Congress was like, "Oh, okay, well, go ahead and do your thing." So as it turns out, this is the fun part, Ilaria. As it turns out, he marked all the parts beforehand with the intention of taking them apart and mixing them up, and so it was all a lie. And he completely went in there and faked Congress to believe that he mixed up these parts and put them together. So it didn't actually happen. But anyways, he did deliver the 10,000 muskets. It took him 8 years to do it. And so this is the part I'm a little bit confused about this because it said that historians didn't actually think that he ever achieved interchangeable parts in his lifetime, but his gun company was able to do that after his death, or his firearm company, or whatever they call it, after Eli Whitney's death. But he delivered those 10,000 muskets over the course of 8 years, and then Congress wrote him a contract for another 15,000 that he had to deliver in the next 4 years. So maybe they weren't actually interchangeable. Maybe nobody tried it, right? They just stuck them in a shelf somewhere and said, "Okay, give us 15,000 more." I'm not sure. But what I can tell you is history is full of stories like that, and it's really cool. But yeah, so the idea of the interchangeable part existed before Eli Whitney. There was a French guy who built some muskets who originally tried to do this. But can you imagine now if you had to have a replacement part for your car and you had to like have it custom made because they did not have interchangeable parts? That would be crazy. I wonder, what is the thing that is being invented or will be invented now that people will look back on in 100 years or, 200 years and say, wow, wouldn't life be crazy if that didn't happen? Yeah. So back to the cotton gin, though. The manual cotton process was extremely slow and labor intensive. Obviously, he invented this machine. It increased efficiency, right? That's a machine. It's a very easy way to tell, hey, efficiency was increased because of this machine. So it increased the cotton processing speed by 50 times. It's pretty impressive. So we already talked about the interchangeable parts. So he helped a lot, down the road with different industries and manufacturing, and kind of, I think, seems like helped fuel the industrial revolution, right? So the next one is Walt Disney, and so I'll make this one pretty brief and efficient. Is before an invention that we're going to talk about here in a second, it was extremely labor intensive to make animated films, and it was really expensive. There was no guarantee that you were even going to sell tickets to it or anything, and so I think people kind of just like shied away from it, right? So I actually looked at this a few days ago, and it's a pretty cool thing. But Disney introduced a multi-plane camera. It's basically like, all of the scenes in these old animated movies, they're frames, right? And each frame was drawn or painted or whatever by hand, and like they filmed the hand paintings with a camera, and that's how they were able to make these animated movies. And so what they did was they set up a rack, essentially, that these could go in, and it was a bunch of layers so they could move at different speeds and stuff like that, and it kind of gave some depth to the animated film that didn't exist before. But anyways, um, so that's pretty much what I had down here for Walt Disney, was that the multi-plane camera, and I just think that it's kind of neat. But it did allow like animated films to actually happen, right? So they made Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and they used storyboards. Okay, so storyboards weren't really a thing before Disney, and that they also used this multi-plane camera and all this, and it says it was the first full-length animated film, and so they were able to make things efficient enough that they could, actually make a full-length film. And I don't know if it showed in theaters or something, but uh, I guess it was cheap enough that they were willing to roll the dice and kind of take a chance that it would work out for them. And here we are. There's animated movies all over the place now. So, all right, I tried to make that one quick. One more, two more. Man, I feel exhausted. Uh, yeah. So Thomas Edison, I'm just going to talk about one thing with him. Yeah, Thomas Edison, he had 1,000 patents, right? A lot of people think about him at the light bulb, because he made an incandescent light bulb that lasted a long time, and designed an electrical power system to go with it to make it practical. But I think the first light bulb he made lasted like 13 and a half hours, and that was like super revolutionary then. But what I think's cool is this Menlo Park Laboratory. So it was the first industrial research lab where teams collaborated on multiple projects simultaneously. I guess before this, each team worked on one specific project. And so there was not multiple things happening. So now we've got one facility, there's multiple teams working on their projects, but they also collaborate, right? And so you kind of get like that cross training thing that happens in offices and in businesses now. Sorry. So what are you doing? Right? You're getting when you're cross training, sure. So you're teaching somebody how to work on a different project, right? But also you're getting a fresh set of eyes on that project. And you never know when that person may come over there and say, hey, why do you do it this way? Why don't you do it like that? Boom. There's efficiency right there. Boom. That was so. I think cross training is great. Another benefit for efficiency from cross training is if a person leaves or a person is out sick for a while or anything like that, then if you have somebody else that's capable of filling that role, then maybe you can kind of like spread, or two or three people, then you can kind of like spread that load out some instead of having one person who now has to do two jobs. You can just kind of spread out the missing person's job across two or three people, and that'll get you by for a few days until they come back. If they do leave, then same thing. Now you got a few folks that can kind of carry a little bit of the weight. So you don't just have a gaping hole, right? It's going to put more stress on everybody, but there's not just a gaping hole. So I think cross training is important. Um, I, I think, and it's like I've used the results of cross training a lot where I've been able to spread the load out when people were gone, kind of shifted people around. Sometimes you figure out that a person is actually better suited for another job when they're cross training. And then you're able to shuffle people around and put them in a different role. They're happier, they're more efficient. The environment, the culture gets an improvement because now this person is happy and excited about what they're doing. So it gives you opportunities that you wouldn't normally have. So something else that I would suggest people probably think about doing. So Herb Keller, Southwest Airlines. So what Southwest did was in the 70s, it was really expensive to fly. And so they figured out how to simplify their operations with a low cost, no frills model, right? So they eliminated, go all the way back to the Toyota way and the Muda, right? And remember, I talked about how sometimes we were delivering things to the customer that they would be just as happy without, and we could save them money or make it faster, whatever the case may be. So this is what they did, right? They were like, wait a minute, people don't want this whole thing, right? They just want to get in the plane and they want to get there. And so they delivered that and it lowered the cost and people started flying more. So they standardized. Okay. I think standardization is a huge thing. If you can standardize your processes, that's really great. If you can standardize your offerings, that's good. But I'm not one to really want to tell people no. So if somebody's like, "Hey, can you get me this fence?" Then I might say, "Oh, well, this other manufacturer has something that's the same and like we're familiar." I mean, I wouldn't tell them that we're familiar with this manufacturer, but if it was a manufacturer that we used and tried to like standardize to their specific products, then I would try to steer the customer to, something that is the same as what they asked for. But like I said, I'm not one to tell people no, so people can come up with some crazy stuff, and I'll say, "Yeah, sure, why not?" Um, I did just today. I have a meeting. I don't know if they've actually scheduled it or not, but I sent them a link to schedule a meeting, and they want me to look at some sort of fence that's going around a pool, like 3 or 4 hours away from me. And it's at a hotel, right? So it's a commercial job. But I was like, man, honestly, I said, I don't know if it makes any sense for us to try to do the job, but I'm happy to meet with you. I can look at it, answer your questions, and then I'll understand what it is. And they're like, well, could you provide the material? I said, I don't really know what the fence is or what the job is. So, I mean, the best answer I can give you is like a probably. But anyways, so we'll find out what that is. But again, I didn't tell them no, right? They're 3 or 4 hours away. I'm probably not going to be the person to install a fence around a pool that far away. Someone is probably going to beat me, but I'm definitely happy to take a look at it. And maybe it makes sense. I don't know what kind of fence it is. It might make sense for us. It might not. If it doesn't, then I'm pretty upfront and pretty honest about that. And I tell people like, no, sorry, you should find someone local to install that. Or, maybe I know a company that could do a better job than we could even, or something along those lines. Uh, I just kind of try to be like that. But anyways, so they standardize. They've used all Boeing 737s. And so now what do they have to do? The people, their mechanics have to know how to do maintenance on one plane, right? All of their other, I don't know, flight attendants and pilots and everybody else, they got to know how to do stuff on one plane, right? And I personally think it's brilliant. I've been trying to standardize the trucks that we run, where it's like, okay, we're going to have three offerings. And we're going to have a pickup truck. We're going to have a medium duty truck, and we're going to have a heavier medium duty truck. And that's our 3 trucks. So I've been trying to work towards that because I think standardizing stuff I think it's brilliant. Instead of having, we do have a few different models of skid steer, but they all run, like, a lot of them run similar parts, right? So they're interchangeable parts. And so if something goes down, or if we have to order new tracks for them, like, we don't have to really go out and be like, wait a minute, what size was that one? Which machine needs these tracks? I think standardizing is a big thing, and it makes us more efficient. Even that little thing, I mean, it might save me, a couple hours a year, but I mean, that's a couple hours a year. So they got it to where downtime between flights, get this, Ilaria, downtime between the flights was 10 minutes.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy?
That's crazy.
So I guess from the time the people got off the plane until the plane was leaving again was only 10 minutes.
Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah, that's wild. Because I feel like now it takes 30 minutes to get off the stinking plane after it lands. So, but anyways, they did it. So that it said that they focused on their core strengths, and that drove significant cost savings, and operational efficiency. So standardized core strengths, right? Instead of trying to do everything, which is completely contradicting what I just talked about a minute ago, where I have a hard time telling people no. I know it's probably not the best way to do business, but that's who I am. I don't know why. So yeah, it made air travel more affordable, and Southwest, they were profitable even during industry downturns and hard times and stuff like that. So I think we can all probably, like, I personally think I can spend some time focusing on simplifying operations. And they also said that they like to foster a strong, positive company culture. So a fun story about Herb Keller was he once settled a legal dispute with another airline over a slogan by an arm wrestling match. Yeah, he arm wrestled. So that's pretty crazy. Anyways, that's my whole list. I told you we were trucking along, Ilaria.
I didn't think it was gonna happen.
It did. And look at that. It's not even an hour yet. I still have to talk for 2 more minutes.
He's laid.
What am I going to talk about for 2 minutes? Oh my goodness. What if I just sat here in silence and drank my coffee and stared at the camera for 2 minutes? Right. That would be super awkward. Man, there's so much good stuff in here. I feel like I kind of probably maybe could have like spread this out over a few different episodes. Bless you. I could have kind of spread this out a little bit more, but I mean, I didn't know what to eliminate. I started looking at this and I was like, all right, I need to cut some of these stories out of here. And I didn't really know which one to cut out because I liked them all. But a pretty consistent pattern, or a recurring theme across a lot of these was you had standardizing, right? So a lot of people standardize things. And then you also had processes, right? So you wanted to, they created processes that were scalable, and standards and operations and all of those things, right? That were scalable and that they could apply across multiple locations and all of these things. Obviously technology, right? I'm not going to beat that dead horse again since we talked about it so much a couple of weeks ago, but using technology is a huge thing. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Oh, cross training. Learned a little bit about that. That's cool. So that's what I've got. Thanks everybody for listening. I appreciate you being here. Sorry, I don't know. Felt kind of, maybe, was it a little boring, Ilaria?
No.
No? It was super exciting?
We've done better.
Yeah.
But it was not boring.
Yeah, so it was kind of I agree. I feel kind of
It's the first episode. I feel like half the people are still on vacation.
We're supposed to start the year off with a bang. We did.
We did.
It was great. It was amazing. All right. Thanks everybody for listening. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.
See ya.